My husband slapped me in the face and demanded my house key and access to $10 million savings account. Pathetic woman. You're nothing without me. Hand me the house key and don't forget the access code to that 10 million. You're too useless to manage it anyway. The slap came first, sharp, humiliating, final. Then the laughter, cold and cruel, as if the years she spent by his side meant nothing. To him, she wasn't a wife. She wasn't a partner. She was a stepping stone, a bank account, a woman to be stripped of everything and discarded. Her face burned, not just from his hand, but from the shame of realizing she had married a man who saw her as worthless. Yet in that very moment of pain, something deeper stirred within her, a fire that even his cruelty could not kill. Because sometimes the ones who call you nothing are the very reason you rise to become everything. This is the story of a wife mocked, beaten, and betrayed, only to rise in a way no one saw coming. And today, it is being retold by me. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together we are not just telling stories. We are keeping hope alive. The chandelier above the dining hall sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. Laughter floated through the air, glasses clinked, and expensive perfume mixed with the rich smell of roasted lamb and red wine. Emily sat across from her husband, Richard, her smile soft, her dress a flowing midnight blue. Richard and Emily, one of the women at the table said with admiration, "You two are truly an inspiration. Look at the way he looks at you, Emily. If only my husband adored me like that." Richard chuckled, his hand resting lightly on Emily's shoulder. "Well," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "when you're married to the most beautiful woman in the room, it's easy to adore her." The table erupted in little sighs and laughter. Emily's cheeks warmed. She lowered her eyes, as if shy from the attention. For a moment she almost believed it herself, that this was real, that Richard was everything the world thought him to be. But she knew better. When the guests weren't looking, when his hand slipped from her shoulder, his fingers pinched hard enough to bruise. No one else noticed the flash of warning in his eyes, the silent command to behave. Later that night, the glamour ended. The house was silent, the lights dimmed. Emily stepped out of her heels and rubbed her sore feet, glad to be away from the noise. Richard loosened his tie, tossing it carelessly onto the couch. The mask had already fallen. His voice, once warm and playful, was now sharp as broken glass. "Next time, Emily," he said coldly, "don't interrupt me when I'm talking." "Do you have any idea how stupid you sounded, babbling about charity projects while I was discussing investments?" Emily froze, still holding her shoes. "I wasn't interrupting. I thought—" "You don't think?" He cut her off. He walked over to the bar, poured himself a glass of whiskey and swallowed half of it in one gulp. "That's the problem. You don't think. You just open your mouth and embarrass me." She bit her lip. "I was only trying to be part of the conversation. They asked me directly." Richard slammed the glass down on the counter so hard that Emily jumped. "You don't have to explain yourself to me. Just shut your mouth next time. I don't need you to be part of the conversation. I need you to sit there and smile. That's what you're good at." The words stung, though Emily tried not to show it. She placed her shoes neatly by the door, her movements slow, deliberate. She had learned not to react too quickly. Richard liked when she flinched. It gave him power. "Richard," she whispered, "you used to encourage me to speak my mind." He barked a laugh, cruel and humorless. "That was before I realized what little mind you actually have." The days that followed were no different. In public, Richard was the perfect gentleman. He opened doors, kissed her cheek, and told their friends how lucky he was to have her. But at home, he barely looked at her unless it was to criticize. "You're spending too much on groceries. Do you think money grows on trees? You've put on weight. You should care about how you look if you expect me to keep you around." Why is this house always so quiet? Can't you at least act like you're useful? Emily tried to brush it off. She told herself he was under stress, that maybe work was eating at him. She held on to the good memories, the way he once held her hand during thunderstorms, the way he promised her forever. But those memories grew dimmer each day. The breaking point came on a stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows, the wind howling outside like a warning. Emily stood in the kitchen, washing dishes slowly, lost in her thoughts. Richard stormed in, his phone in his hand, his face twisted in rage. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he snapped. Emily looked up, startled. "What are you talking about?" He shoved the phone in her face. "Don't play dumb with me. I saw the bank alert. You transferred money from our account without telling me." Her hands shook, wet from the soap and water. "It wasn't without telling you. I used the savings to pay for the orphanage project, something we both agreed to support." Richard's voice turned venomous. "I didn't agree to anything. You decided. You always think you're some saint, saving the world with my money." Emily's chest tightened. "It's not your money, Richard. It's mine. The inheritance." Before she could finish, his hand cracked across her face. The sound echoed louder than the thunder outside. Emily staggered back, one hand flying to her cheek. The sting burned hot, the taste of iron in her mouth. Richard leaned close, his breath sour with whiskey. "Don't you ever forget," he hissed. "You are nothing without me. That house? Those accounts? That 10 million? You don't deserve any of it. Hand me the house key and the access code to the savings. I'll take care of what you're too stupid to handle." Tears filled Emily's eyes, but she forced herself to stay upright. Her cheek throbbed, but she refused to let him see her fall. Richard straightened, smirking as if he had already won. "I'll say this once, Emily. Give me the keys and the code. Otherwise, you'll regret it." Emily spent that night sitting on the edge of her bed, the left side of her face swollen and red. She stared at the mirror, touching the bruise gently, shame flooding her chest. She replayed his words over and over. "You're nothing without me." The words cut deeper than the slap. Emily had grown up believing in love, believing that marriage meant partnership. When her father died and left her the inheritance, she thought Richard had married her for love, not for money. Now, sitting there in silence, she wondered if she had been a fool from the very beginning. She wanted to call someone, her mother, a friend, but her phone felt heavy in her hand. She knew what they would say. "You're overreacting. Richard is a good man. Be patient. Be a wife." So she stayed silent. The next morning, Richard acted as if nothing had happened. He came down the stairs in a crisp suit, sipping his coffee, scrolling through his phone. "You're making scrambled eggs again?" he said without looking at her. "You know I hate when they're dry." Emily swallowed hard. Her cheek still throbbed, but she kept her head down. "I'll make them softer." "Good," he said simply. He kissed her on the forehead before heading out the door, as if last night's violence had never happened. The door shut, leaving Emily alone with the silence. Days turned into weeks. Richard grew bolder, more demanding. He asked again and again for the house key and the account codes, mocking her when she refused. "You think you can run a household?" he sneered one night. "You can barely decide what to cook for dinner. You don't know how to manage money. Give it to me before you lose it all," Emily tried to argue. "Richard, my father trusted me with that money. He told me to use it wisely, to build, not waste." Richard's face twisted with contempt. "Your father was an old fool, and you're even more of one. If you think you're capable of handling millions, hand it over, Emily, before you embarrass yourself." Every word chipped away at her, but still she refused. Something inside her, something quiet but unshakable, told her not to give in. One afternoon, while putting away laundry, Emily noticed something strange. Richard's cufflinks were missing. They were expensive, a gift from one of his business partners. She searched the house but couldn't find them. Later that evening, Richard came home late. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume, not hers. He brushed past her quickly, avoiding her eyes. "Long day," he muttered, heading straight upstairs. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to ask where he had been, but she knew better. Asking questions only led to insults, or worse. Still, doubt gnawed at her. A few days later, Emily left the house earlier than usual to visit the local market. As she walked, back with groceries, she passed by a quiet cafe tucked on the corner of Maple Street. Something in the window made her stop. Richard. He was sitting at a table leaning close to a woman with golden hair. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized her. Claire, her cousin, her younger cousin, who had spent summers in Emily's home when they were children. The cousin who always said, "I want to be just like you, Emily." Now Claire was sitting across from Richard, her hand resting on his wrist, her smile coy. Emily ducked behind a lamppost, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might burst. She strained to hear but could only catch fragments of their conversation. Richard's voice, low and commanding. "She's too soft, too trusting. She doesn't suspect a thing." Claire's laugh, light and cruel. "I told you she never checks her accounts. All I have to do is ask her a few innocent questions, and she tells me everything." Richard smirked. "Good. Keep it that way. Soon she'll hand over the keys. Then the money is ours." Emily felt the world spin. The groceries slipped from her arms, apples rolling across the sidewalk, but she didn't even notice. Her cousin, her own blood, feeding Richard her secrets, betraying her trust. She wanted to scream, to march into the cafe and expose them, but her legs refused to move. She stood frozen, her throat dry, her chest tight. Claire leaned closer to Richard, whispering something that made him laugh. That laugh, so different from the fake warmth he gave her in public, cut through Emily like a knife. Emily stumbled home, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the keys. She sank onto the couch, staring at the walls, her mind reeling. It wasn't just Richard anymore. It was her family, her cousin. Tears blurred her vision, but beneath the grief, something else stirred. A flicker of fire. They thought she was weak. They thought she would give in. But Emily knew now, this was no longer about love or marriage. This was war. And though her heart was breaking, she made herself a silent promise. "They will not take everything from me, not without a fight." If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give future to children and women abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing to hitting the subscribe button and turning on your notification bell. Also let us know in the comments where you are watching us from and how this story hit home for you. Emily woke up the next morning with swollen eyes. Sleep had been impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard's hand striking her and Claire's face leaning in close to him at that cafe. She dragged herself into the kitchen, moving like a shadow in her own home. The house no longer felt like hers. The walls felt hostile, the air heavy with Richard's presence. When Richard came down the stairs, he was smiling, humming as if the world was perfect. "Good morning, darling," he said smoothly, kissing her cheek as if nothing had happened. "What's for breakfast?" Emily stared at him, her stomach twisting. "Oatmeal," she muttered. Richard frowned. "Again?" "You know I hate that slop. Couldn't you at least make an effort? Honestly, Emily, it's like you don't even care what I want." She clenched the spoon in her hand, but said nothing. He always wanted more. No matter what she did, it was never enough. Later that day, Emily decided to call her mother. She sat on the edge of the bed, phone trembling in her hands. Maybe her mother would finally see. Maybe she'd help. "Mom," Emily whispered when the line connected. I don't know what to do anymore. Richard, he hit me." There was a long silence on the other end. Then her mother sighed. "Emily, you must have provoked him. Men don't just hit for no reason. Marriage is not easy. You have to learn patience." Emily's chest tightened. "Mom, He's trying to take everything. The house, the inheritance. He's with Claire. I saw them together. Her mother's voice grew sharp. Don't drag Claire into this. She's family. And as for the inheritance, maybe Richard is right. You're too emotional, Emily. You've always been soft. Maybe it's better if he handles it. The words cut deeper than Richard's slap. Emily hung up the phone with tears streaming down her face. She had no one. Not even her own mother believed her. That evening, Richard came home later than usual. His tie was loosened, and his shirt carried that same faint trace of perfume. He walked in with a smug smile, tossing his jacket onto the chair. "Did you think about what I said?" he asked casually. Emily's throat went dry. "About what?" "The keys." "The code. Don't play dumb. Give them to me, Emily. You're only making things harder for yourself." She shook her head. "No, that money is for the future, for projects, for nothing," he snapped, cutting her off. "For your silly little fantasies. Orphanages, donations. Do you think the world cares about your bleeding heart? No one does. That money could be doubled, tripled if you let me manage it. But no, you'd rather waste it like a child." "I'm not a child," Emily whispered. Richard smirked cruelly. "Then prove it. Hand over the keys." A week later, Emily received an unexpected visitor. Claire. She showed up at Emily's door with a bright smile, hugging her as if nothing was wrong. "Emily, it's been too long," Claire said sweetly. "I thought I'd stop by and check on you." Emily stiffened in her arms. "You've been busy," she said flatly. Claire tilted her head, pretending not to understand. "Busy? Oh, you mean work? Yes, it's been crazy. But I always make time for family." They sat in the living room. Claire crossed her legs, sipping the tea Emily reluctantly made. "So," Claire said casually, "Richard tells me you've been under a lot of stress lately. Is that true?" Emily's heart raced. "Richard told you that?" Claire nodded, her expression soft but her eyes sharp. "He worries about you. He says you've been struggling to manage things. You know, the accounts, the house. He doesn't want you to feel overwhelmed." Emily gripped her cup tightly. "He doesn't want me to manage anything, you mean?" Claire laughed lightly, brushing it off. "Don't be so dramatic, Emily. Richard loves you. He only wants what's best. Maybe you should trust him more." Emily stared at her cousin, the pieces clicking together in her mind. Claire wasn't here to comfort her. She was here to spy, to dig, to find out if Emily was breaking, if she was ready to hand over everything. Her voice shook, but she managed to say, "I don't need Richard to run my life. Or my money." Claire smiled, but her eyes glinted. "Of course not, darling. But think about it. Wouldn't it be easier to just let him handle things? Men are better at that sort of stuff." Emily set her cup down, her jaw tight. She had heard enough. After Claire left, Emily sat in silence for a long time. The house felt colder, emptier. She realized Claire had said nothing kind, nothing real. Every word had been calculated, carefully placed, like daggers hidden behind a smile. She whispered to herself, "She's with him. She's helping him." It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was truth. That weekend, Richard insisted they attend a charity gala together. Emily didn't want to go. Her face still bore faint traces of the bruise, and her heart was heavy, but Richard wouldn't hear it. "You're coming," he said firmly, adjusting his cufflinks. "And you will smile. Do you understand me?" Emily's stomach twisted. "Richard, I don't feel—" He grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her wince. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Don't embarrass me. Not tonight. Do what I say, or you'll regret it." So she went. The ballroom was filled with glittering gowns, polished shoes, and the sound of laughter. Couples danced under chandeliers. Waiters carried trays of champagne. Richard played his role perfectly. He held Emily's hand, introduced her with a smile, and told everyone how lucky he was. She's the heart of this family, he said to one couple, while his fingers dug painfully into her waist where no one could see. Emily smiled, though her chest was tight. But then, after too many drinks, Richard decided to put on a show. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, raising his glass, "I want to thank you all for coming tonight. And I want to introduce my wife, my beautiful Emily." People clapped politely. Emily nodded shyly. Richard's smile turned sharp. "Isn't she something? Though between us, she's a little fragile these days. Stress, you know? Sometimes I worry about her mind. Poor thing can't handle the pressure of finances. That's why I take care of it all." The crowd laughed uncomfortably. Emily froze, humiliation flooding her. He was mocking her, publicly, cruelly, while everyone smiled politely, pretending not to notice. "She's sweet, though," Richard continued, his tone mocking. "Always talking about giving away money. Orphanages, shelters, schools. What would we do if I didn't stop her? She'd give away every last dollar. She's too soft for this world." Emily wanted the floor to open and swallow her. Her hands trembled, her throat tight. She saw people exchanging glances, pity in their eyes. And then, the final blow. Richard leaned in, his voice just loud enough for those closest to hear. "But don't worry, I keep her in check. She knows who's really in charge." Laughter followed, cold, sharp laughter that rang in Emily's ears long after. That night, in the car, Emily stared out the window in silence. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry in front of him. Richard leaned back, smug. "What's wrong?" "Don't pout. They all loved you." She turned to him, her voice breaking. "You humiliated me," he chuckled. "Don't be dramatic. I just told the truth. Everyone already knows you can't manage things. I saved you the embarrassment of pretending otherwise." Emily clenched her fists. "I hate you." For a moment, his smile slipped. His hand shot out, gripping her chin painfully, forcing her to look at him. "Don't ever say that again," he hissed. "You think you can hate me? You belong to me, Emily. You're mine to break, mine to use, mine to control. Don't forget it." She pulled away, trembling. Silence filled the car for the rest of the ride. Over the next few days, Richard tightened his grip even more. He began locking her out of bank notifications, changing passwords, and moving papers around so she couldn't track anything. Emily asked about it once, and he laughed in her face. "Do you really think you can outsmart me?" "You wouldn't last a day without me." But the deepest cut came when she sought comfort from her mother again. "Mom," Emily pleaded, her voice raw, "he's destroying me. He's taking control of everything. Please, I need your support." Her mother sighed. "Emily, stop this nonsense. Richard is a man of vision. He knows how to handle money. You're too emotional, too naive. Claire told me you've been acting unstable. Maybe you should let him lead." Emily's stomach dropped. "Claire told you that?" "Yes," her mother said firmly. "She cares about you. She wants to see you happy. And honestly, Emily, she might be right. If you keep fighting Richard, you'll lose him, and everything else." Emily hung up without another word. Her mother, her cousin, her husband, all against her. That night, Emily sat alone in the dark, curled on the couch. The house that once felt warm now felt like a prison. The walls pressed in on her, and the silence screamed louder than any sound. For the first time, she felt truly powerless. She was surrounded by betrayal. Richard controlled her life. Claire whispered lies in her ear. Even her mother doubted her. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Maybe I really am nothing. Maybe he's right." Tears streamed down her face, but beneath the grief, somewhere deep inside, a small ember still burned. She wasn't ready to see it yet, but that ember would one day ignite. For now, though, Emily sat in the dark, broken and alone. The whispers began slowly, then spread like wildfire. At first, Emily noticed the way friends avoided her calls. Then the polite smiles at gatherings, the subtle distance in their voices. She didn't understand until she overheard a conversation at the country club. "Poor Emily," one woman whispered to another. "Richard says she's been unstable. Drinking, Overspending. I didn't want to believe it, but you can tell, can't you? She looks so fragile. Emily froze, her chest tightening. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true. She wanted to tell them about the bruises, the lies, the betrayals. But the words died in her throat, because she knew who had planted the story. Richard. The humiliation worsened. One evening, Richard came home with a cruel smile. "You'll thank me later," he said. "I made a few calls today. Told some people about your condition." Emily's stomach dropped. "Condition?" he smirked. "Your drinking problem, your instability, how you can't be trusted with money." "I don't drink," Emily whispered, horrified. Richard stepped closer, his voice sharp. "You do when I say you do. And now everyone believes it. That's what matters." She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "Why? Why are you doing this to me?" He leaned in, his breath hot against her ear. "Because it's easier to take everything from someone when the world already thinks they're broken." The breaking point came at another gala. Emily didn't want to go, but Richard forced her, saying, "If you stay home, people will really think you've lost it." So she went. She put on her best gown, painted on a smile, and tried to hold her head high. At first, the night passed quietly. She stayed close to Richard, sipping only water, determined to prove she wasn't what he said she was. But halfway through the evening, Richard raised his voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Emily," he snapped, "you've had enough. Don't embarrass yourself." Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Emily froze, clutching her glass of water. I haven't had anything," she stammered. Richard shook his head with mock pity. "See?" Denial. Always denial. "She doesn't even know when to stop. I'm sorry, everyone, but I can't let her stay. She's not well." Before she could react, Richard grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the exit. People whispered, some shaking their heads, others looking away. Not one of them defended her. Outside, the cold air hit her like a slap. She pulled free from his grip, her chest heaving. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. Richard's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. "Because you make it too easy." "Everyone believes me, Emily. They see a fragile little wife. No one will take your side. And soon, you won't have a dime left to your name." Emily's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, sobbing as Richard walked away, leaving her alone in the dark. For days, Emily could barely move. She stayed in her room, curtains drawn, the weight of shame pressing down on her. The world thought she was a drunk, a fool, a woman losing her mind. And Richard was the one feeding them the lies. One evening, she opened the old chest her father had left her. She hadn't touched it in years. Inside, she found letters, faded, yellowed with time. Her father's handwriting was steady and strong. "Emily, never let anyone control what belongs to you. Money is power, and power attracts liars. Protect what you inherit. Trust your heart, but guard your fortune. Some people will marry for love. Others will marry for greed. Learn the difference." Emily's hands shook as she read the words. She pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, something shifted. For the first time in weeks, she felt clarity. Richard hadn't married her for love. He had married her for money. And Claire, she was his accomplice. She had been blind, but no more. The next morning, Emily stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale, but behind them burned something new, a quiet strength. Richard thought she was broken. He thought she would surrender. But he was wrong. Emily wouldn't collapse. Not this time. Emily moved differently after that night with her father's letters. She no longer wandered through the house like a ghost. Instead, she observed, listened, and waited. Richard thought she was weak, but weakness had one advantage. It made her invisible. He never suspected she was paying attention. One morning, as Richard left for work, he carelessly tossed a receipt onto the counter. Emily waited until the door slammed before picking it up. Her eyes scanned the paper. A fancy restaurant. 2 entrees. 2 glasses of wine. She knew he hadn't been dining alone. She tucked the receipt into a folder she had hidden in her closet. A folder that was slowly filling with little pieces of truth. Copies of bank statements Richard tried to hide, recordings of his insults when he thought no one was listening, photos of bruises fading on her skin. Emily also remembered Claire's visits. Her cousin had always asked too many questions about the inheritance, the accounts, the house. Now Emily understood why. So, the next time Claire called, Emily answered with forced cheer. "Claire! I've been meaning to talk to you. I've been thinking maybe Richard's right. Maybe I really should give him control of the money. What do you think?" On the other end of the line, Claire's voice brightened instantly. "Oh, Emily, that's wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. Richard is so much better at these things." Emily smiled faintly. Her cousin had walked right into the trap. She was helping Richard because she wanted a share, but Emily would be the one to turn their greed into evidence. She recorded the entire call. Days turned into weeks. Emily worked quietly, carefully, hiding her growing pile of evidence where Richard would never find it. But she knew she couldn't fight this battle alone. That's when she thought of Daniel. Daniel was an old friend, more than a friend once before Richard had come into her life. Now he was a respected lawyer with a reputation for tearing apart liars in court. It had been years since they'd spoken, but desperation pushed her to call him. When his voice came through the phone, steady and familiar, Emily almost broke down. "Emily," Daniel said gently, "it's been a long time." "Yes," she whispered, "too long. I need your help." There was a pause. Then his voice firmed. "Tell me everything." They met in secret, away from prying eyes. Emily poured out her story, the slap, the demands, the lies, the betrayal with Claire. Daniel's jaw tightened as he listened. "Emily, what he's doing isn't just cruel. It's calculated. He's setting you up to strip you of everything, but you're smart to start collecting proof. With enough evidence, we can stop him." For the first time in months, Emily felt hope. "You really think so?" "I know so," Daniel said firmly. "But you have to be careful. Men like Richard, they get sloppy when they think they've already won. That's when we strike." Emily nodded. She felt stronger with Daniel at her side, even if the world still believed Richard's lies. Meanwhile, Richard grew bolder. He strutted through the house, drunk with his own power, gloating about the future. One night, he cornered Emily in the study, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "You know, Emily," he said, swirling a glass of whiskey, "I've been patient with you." But patience only lasts so long. Emily stood still, her heart racing, but she didn't flinch. "What are you talking about?" He leaned close, his smile cruel. "Tomorrow, the accounts will be in my name. The house, too. Everything. You'll be out on the streets where you belong." Her blood ran cold, but she forced her face into calmness. Richard mistook her silence for defeat. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Pathetic woman, did you really think you could stop me?" But Emily said nothing. She only stared at him, her mind already racing, her evidence folder heavy in her memory. Because if Richard thought tomorrow was his victory, he was in for the shock of his life. The morning sun cut through the clouds, but Emily felt no warmth. She stood outside the tall glass building of the bank, her heart hammering in her chest. Today would decide everything. Beside her, Daniel adjusted his tie and gave her a steady look. "Are you ready?" Emily's throat was dry, but her voice came out firm. "Yes, for the first time in a long time, I'm ready." She clutched the folder of evidence in her bag, the receipts, recordings, bank statements and the phone call with Claire, proof of every betrayal. Richard thought today would be his victory, but it would be his ruin. Inside the bank, Richard strolled confidently across the polished marble floor. Claire walked beside him, her golden hair gleaming under the lights, her lips curved in a smug smile. They looked like royalty approaching their throne. Richard's voice boomed as he approached the manager's office. "We're here to finalize the account transfers. My wife has finally come to her senses. It's time everything was put in my name. The manager, Mr. Lawson, looked uneasy. He shuffled papers on his desk. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, if you'll have a seat. Richard smirked and sat, throwing an arm casually around Claire's chair instead of Emily's. Claire giggled softly, as if enjoying the joke only they understood. Emily and Daniel entered quietly, standing just behind them. Richard's smile faltered when he saw her. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. Daniel's voice was calm, measured. "She is the legal account holder, Mr. Collins. Of course she should be here." Richard waved a dismissive hand. "Not for long. By the end of today, she'll have nothing." Mr. Lawson cleared his throat. "Actually, before we proceed, there's been a development. The accounts are currently frozen by court order." The room fell silent. Richard's face twisted in confusion. "Frozen? What nonsense is this?" Daniel laid a stack of documents on the desk. "Filed this morning. My client, Mrs. Emily Collins, has submitted evidence of fraud, manipulation, and coercion. Until the investigation is complete, no funds can be transferred." Richard's face turned red. He shot to his feet, slamming his hand on the desk. "This is outrageous! Do you know who I am?" Emily rose slowly, her voice steady. "Yes, Richard. You're a liar, a thief, and soon everyone will see it." She pulled the folder from her bag and laid out the evidence piece by piece. The receipts from expensive dinners with Claire, the bank transfers Richard had hidden, photos of her bruises, the audio recording of him mocking her, calling her worthless, demanding her keys and codes. Gasps filled the room. Mr. Lawson's eyes widened. The clerks nearby stopped their work, listening in stunned silence. Claire's face drained of colour. She shifted in her chair, her confidence faltering. Richard sneered. "This is nothing but a pathetic wife's lies. None of it will hold up." But Emily's voice rose, strong and clear. "Then perhaps you'd like everyone to hear this." She pulled out her phone and played the recording of Claire's call. "Maybe Richard's right," Emily's voice said on the recording. Claire's voice followed, sweet and sharp. "Oh, Emily, that's wonderful. I knew you'd see reason. Richard is so much better at these things." The room buzzed with murmurs. Claire's hands shook. Richard turned on her, eyes blazing. "You fool! You let her trap you!" Claire stammered. I didn't know." But Emily wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on Richard's. "You thought I was weak. You thought you could beat me down until I broke, but every slap, every insult, every betrayal only gave me strength. And now, Richard, it's your turn to fall." Mr. Lawson cleared his throat, trying to maintain order. "Mr. Collins, this evidence is damning. Until further notice, you have no authority over these accounts." Richard exploded. "You can't do this to me. I built this life, not her." Emily's voice cut through his fury like a blade. "You built nothing. You used me, lied to me, cheated on me. And now the world knows the truth." Richard turned to Claire, desperate. "Tell them! Tell them I was going to take care of you. Tell them we were in this together." Claire's face crumpled under the pressure. Her voice shook as she blurted out, "He promised me everything. He said once Emily was ruined, he'd marry me. He said we'd have it all." The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, disgusted looks. Bank staff stared at them as if they were filth. Emily stood tall, her voice ringing with calm authority. "You see? Greed destroys loyalty. Betrayal always eats itself alive." Richard's mask shattered. He lunged toward Emily, his face twisted with rage. "You'll pay for this, you worthless—" Months later, Emily sat on her porch, watching the sun set over her garden. The air was warm, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. She held her father's letter in her hand, the words etched deep into her heart. She whispered softly, "You were right, Dad. Some people marry for love, others for greed. But I learned, and I survived." Her reflection in the window looked different now, stronger, sharper, no longer afraid. She thought of Richard's slap, the sting of it still etched in her memory. But instead of pain, she felt gratitude. "The hand that struck me, she said quietly, was the same hand that freed me. Sometimes betrayal is the fire that forges your courage. Emily smiled faintly, her eyes on the horizon. She had lost everything once, her dignity, her trust, her family. But in losing it, she had found herself, and that was something no one could ever take away again.
He laughed so hard the pen shook in his fingers. The sound bounced off the tall wood panels in the courtroom, like a drum you didn't want to hear. Ethan leaned back, grinning at the rows of people behind us, as if this were a comedy show, not the end of our marriage. Finally, he smirked, pressing the nib to the last page. Freedom. He signed his name with a long, proud line. The paper made a soft scratch. The clerk took the file. The judge, calm, silver-haired Judge Walters, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the documents again. He cleared his throat. The room quieted. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hold its breath. "Before we finalize," the judge said, "we must enter into the record the updated financial disclosures. Mrs. Lane's accounts include 1 checking account, 1 savings account, and a trust." He paused. His eyes flicked up at me, then back to the page. He blinked once, slowly, like he wanted to be sure of his words. "Counsel," he said to both lawyers, "do you see this?" My lawyer, a steady woman named Ms. Harris, stood and nodded. Ethan's lawyer squinted, then frowned. Ethan, still smiling, swung his foot under the table like a child bored in church. The judge read out, voice low and level, each syllable rolling across the room like thunder that doesn't rush, thunder that knows it is thunder. The trust lists a current available balance of $150 million. Ethan's foot stopped. His smile fell off his face like a mask that had come unhooked. He forgot to breathe for a second. Everyone around us gasped, a soft wave of air. The clerk's pen clicked. A camera phone somewhere made the quietest beep. The judge looked at me again. "Mrs. Lane, can you confirm the Mercy Trust is yours?" I opened my mouth. 100 memories scrambled to answer first. A thin hand taking bread across a church table. A laugh in a hospital hallway. A letter with my name on it and a key drawn in blue ink. I swallowed. Ethan turned to me with eyes that suddenly wanted to be kind, the same man who had laughed. "Maya," he whispered. "What is he talking about?" The judge raised his gavel. "We will take 5 minutes to verify the attached letter of intent and the sealed instruction. No one leaves this room." He tapped the gavel once. And that is where the ground under my life, under his laughter, under our paper-thin promises, cracked open. 5 minutes. A secret letter. $150 million. What do you think happened next? I didn't wake up one day and find gold under my pillow. This story began far from the cool air of a courtroom. It began in a hot church kitchen with windows fogged from pots of soup and the sizzle of onions that made your eyes water even if you weren't the one chopping them. It began with a good-natured pastor who believed that when someone knocked at your door, you didn't ask for a reason. You found them a chair. It began with hands, mine, small and often shaking because I wanted to get it right. Serving food to strangers who, little by little, stopped feeling like strangers. Back when Ethan and I were new, the kind of new that makes every text feel like a bell, we used to serve together on Saturdays. He would carry boxes, I would cut fruit. We would share smiles over paper plates and feel like we were building something strong, a small house inside the big world. He said he loved my soft heart. I thought I loved his confident laugh, but hearts can be doors and laughs can be walls. The second year, when the honeymoon glow cooled, Ethan started counting things. He counted our bills, which were heavy. He counted my small paychecks from the after-school program, which were light. He counted the hours I spent at church and with the food pantry, and with the old folks who liked to talk about their cats, their gardens, their aches. He said those hours were wasted kindness, and that kind didn't pay the electricity. "Dreams don't fill fridges, Maya," he said, tossing a flyer from the pantry onto the table. "We need real money. You need a real plan." "I have a plan," I said. I did. It was simple. Do the next right thing. Work with children after school. Take night classes when we could afford them. Save a little. Stay kind. He laughed, not the way he laughed in court, but a smaller laugh, a seed of the bigger one. Kindness is cute, he said, until the landlord knocks. Sometimes you can't tell when a laugh plants itself. On a slow Wednesday, when the sun took a nap behind the clouds and the wind forgot to move the trees, a woman came to the church kitchen. She was not old in the way of numbers. She was old in the way of stories, an old that made you want to pull out a chair and pour a warm cup of tea. She wore a faded scarf like a river that had been folded and unfolded many times. She had the posture of someone who didn't want to take up space, and the eyes of someone who had seen all the space there was. "I'm fine," she said at first, even as her fingers trembled. "I'm only looking." "We're all looking," I said, without thinking. She smiled at that, so I said, "Please sit, ma'am." "I'm not a ma'am," she said, but with a laugh. "I'm Eleanor, when I must." I made her a plate, stew with soft carrots, rice that didn't clump, and a slice of bread with real butter. She ate slowly, as if the body must remember how to accept kindness one bite at a time. When she finished, she tried to stand, but her leg shook and she reached for the table and knocked her glass against the edge. Water spilled and ran in a thin line toward the floor. "Don't worry," I said, wiping it up. "My hands are practice for this." "Practice for what?" she asked. "For catching what falls," I said, drying the table. She studied my face like it was a letter she might need to read again later. We talked. She said she walked to the church because it was quiet here, because the city noise felt like a swarm. She said she missed a daughter who didn't visit, a garden she no longer had, a kitchen where she used to sing to the kettle so it would not boil over. I told her about the after-school kids and the way they loved glue sticks more than they loved reason. I told her about my night classes, the book I kept under my pillow like a foolish child, the way my mother used to say, "If you have enough for 2 spoons of sugar in your tea, you have enough to share one." When Eleanor left, she pressed a paper into my hand. "If you ever need anything," she said. The paper had a phone number and a small drawing of a key. "I won't ask," I said. I had learned to keep my needs folded and put away. "But thank you." "Sometimes," she said, "the door knocks on you." Then she was gone, like a river taking a corner. There are seasons inside a single day. That afternoon Ethan called. "I got the job," he said. "Sales associate. Good base. Commission too. Finally. We can be serious now." "Congratulations," I said. "I meant it. A win is a win." "I can bake that lemon cake you like." "You can, but listen. You should stop the volunteer stuff. Focus on your night classes, or don't. Just bring in more, and stop giving things away for free." "It's not free," I said. "It's food, it's dignity." "It's a habit," he said, "and habits cost. There are truths that tip and truths that stand. That one stood between us like a fence we both leaned on." The job made him taller in his words. He started using phrases like, "My time is valuable and what do I get out of it?" He began to keep a separate account. "For business expenses," he said. He stayed out late with clients. He came home with new shoes that he named investments. "I wish you wouldn't," I said softly. "I wish you would," he said, just as soft, and we both looked at our wishes like 2 birds that didn't know how to share a branch. "But you asked for the highest peak first, and I gave it to you," Ethan laughing while signing a paper that was meant to set us free. "So you deserve the path that climbs there, stone by stone." That winter, Eleanor returned, this time with a scarf bright as a sunrise that wouldn't be rushed. She came every Wednesday after that, at the slow hour between the after-school rush and the dinner line. I kept a stool for her by the window. "If you were an animal," she said one day, "you'd be a small bird that never takes the last crumb. If you were an animal," I said, "you'd be a big cat that pretends not to see the mouse until the mouse needs saving." We laughed. She asked me questions that turned corners I didn't expect. What would you do if you had double your time? What would you do if you had 10 friends who could hold up your arms when they get tired? What would you do if the person you were trying to love didn't know how to be loved? "I would build something," I said, "not a big building, something with open doors, something that makes it easy for people to be kind." You already are, she said. You don't see it because you are standing on it. The day everything bent toward a different future, Eleanor came in holding a small envelope. For you, she said, tapping it twice like a secret handshake. Don't worry, it's not a bill. Inside, a handwritten note and a card. The note said, Mercy is not a favor, it is a map. Use this well. E. The card was for a bank with a name that sounded like a family had argued over it for 100 years, Caldwell Reed. Is this your bank? I asked. It was my father's, she said. For a long time it was mine. I stepped away. But some doors never close. I can't, I said, trying to hand it back. We're fine. What is fine? She asked gently. A word people use when they are drowning quietly. She closed my fingers around the card. It's not a gift, she said. It's a key to a room you already own. But I don't. You will, she said. And then she did what the kind do when you try to refuse kindness. She changed the subject and asked about lemon cake. I didn't use the card. I tucked it into the back of my drawer under the nightshirts and beside the book I was too tired to finish. I kept showing up to the kitchen. I kept taking the bus to the after-school program. I kept trying to hold our marriage together with thread that kept snapping under the weight of all the things we didn't say. Then Ethan started to laugh more at the wrong moments. He laughed when I said we should budget. He laughed when I made a list of things to sell to cover rent that month. He laughed when I said, "Can we please talk like we're on the same team?" He called me soft, then simple, and finally, when he was tired and careless, he called me a charity. Words are seeds. Some grow flowers. Some grow thorns. The day he said, "I don't even think you know how money works," I took a walk. I passed the grocery store with the oranges stacked like suns. I passed the barber shop where men solved everything and nothing. I passed the little library box on the corner where someone had left a book of Proverbs. I opened it at random. Kindness is a river. It flows and returns. I smiled. Then I stopped at the bank I never meant to use. Caldwell Reed had floors that reflected your shoes back at you, and a lobby where you could hear your own thoughts and decide if you liked them. I held the card, the one with the key drawn in blue ink on the note. A woman at the desk looked up. "May I help you?" "I'm not sure," I said, but I smiled because I had decided to like my thoughts. "My name is Maya Lane. I was told to ask for, I don't know, a beginning?" The woman blinked. Then her face softened. "One moment." She disappeared and returned with a man whose suit would have made Ethan salute. "Mrs. Lane," he said, and suddenly my name was a door that opened onto a room full of light. "Right this way." I sat in a glass room that felt both safe and see-through. The man, Mr. Hargrove, placed a folder on the table. Inside were words I didn't understand at first, and then did. Trust, beneficiary, disbursement schedule, asset protection, philanthropic arm. There was a letter at the top, handwritten. "Maya," it said. "Mercy made me. I have no children who want this work. I have watched you feed people and treat them like stories, not numbers. If you accept, you will direct the Mercy Trust to build what you already build, open doors. It is protected from harm, set to grow, and will ask things of you. Use it for good. And when someone knocks, remember, sometimes the door knocks on you. Eleanor Caldwell. I pressed my fingers to the page. The ink felt raised, like it was still drying years later. "I don't understand," I said. "You don't have to yet," Mr. Hargrove said kindly. "We have time. You can keep it quiet, learn, decide. The trust is structured to shield you and those you care about, and to multiply kindness." I did keep it quiet. I took classes, not at night school now, but in rooms where people said things like fiduciary duty and endowment ethics. I met with advisors who spoke to me like I had a brain I was allowed to use. I learned what I never thought I would need to learn. I asked simple questions. I refused to pretend I understood when I didn't. I said, "Explain it to me like I'm a child," and nobody laughed. At home, Ethan laughed at other things. He laughed at the idea of counseling. He laughed at an old pair of my shoes. He laughed at a burned pot like it was a grand joke. The laughter grew teeth. The day he said, Maybe we should make it official. We were both tired. He meant divorce. He said it like a person says, maybe we should take out the trash. I sat on the edge of our bed and felt nothing and everything. I had tried to fix a leak with good intentions. He had opened a window to let the warmth escape. The house was cold. "All right," I said, and because I still believed in kindness even when it hurt, I added, "If that's what you truly want." He smiled with relief that looked like victory. "You'll land on your feet," he said, as if he were doing me a favor by letting me go. "You always do." He patted my shoulder like I was a teammate who'd missed a shot. "Besides," he added light, "it's not like you've got anything to lose." I nearly told him then, not the number, not the shape of the trust, just that I had something steady under me now. But sometimes we keep quiet not to hide but to protect what is still learning to walk. So we came to court. He laughed. He signed. The judge read the line that cracked the room. A trust with $150,000 available, the Mercy Trust in my name. Ms. Harris, my lawyer, had known. She had been the one to file the correct disclosures, the one to tell me, "We will follow the law. We will not gloat. We will stand still. The truth can walk in by itself." The judge lifted the sealed letter attached to the file. The instruction, I had been told, would remain quiet unless needed. He slipped a silver letter opener under the flap, clean as a moon cutting a cloud. Across the aisle, Ethan whispered, "Maya, I didn't know. Listen, we can fix this. We can start over." His voice shook. His laugh was gone. "A recess," the judge said, but then changed his mind as if hearing someone speak in his ear. "No, the letter says it must be read now." He looked up at me. "Mrs. Lane, do you consent?" I thought of a church kitchen. I thought of a river scarf. I thought of a woman who said mercy was a map. I nodded. "On the record," the judge said, and his voice went from soft to steel. "We will hear the sealed instruction of the Mercy Trust's founder, Eleanor Caldwell." He unfolded the paper. The room leaned in. "If this letter is opened," he read, "it means my daughter, in the ways that matter, has told the truth with her life, and the man who laughed at that truth must hear something he will never forget." He stopped. Gasps rose. A phone fell. Ethan's chair scraped the floor. He reached for my hand, then pulled back as if it burned him. The courtroom doors swung open. A woman hurried in, breathless, holding a second envelope stamped with the same small drawing of a key. "Your Honor," she called, voice ringing clear, There's more." "Bailiff," the judge said, and the envelope reached his bench like a tide reaching shore. He placed the second envelope beside the first. The gavel hovered. And that was when the fire alarm, silent all morning, erupted in a sharp, endless cry. Red lights flashed. The walls pulsed. The clerk stood. The crowd rose, a slow wave turning into a fast one. "Everyone remain calm," the bailiff shouted, but calm had never learned to live in rooms like this. Ethan grabbed my sleeve. "Maya," he said. The judge's gavel dropped, one hard, echoing strike, just as the alarm cut like someone had pressed a hand over a screaming mouth. The red lights kept flashing. The judge looked at me. The envelopes waited. The room swayed between two choices: flee or stay and hear the truth that had come so far to find us. "On the record," Judge Walters said again, voice steady now because mercy often sounds like that, "we proceed." He lifted the second envelope, and the first words he read made half the courtroom sit back down in shock. "Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. I love seeing our community on the map. And if you're enjoying this story so far, please like, subscribe, and share so more kind hearts can find it." The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom, reading from the second envelope. "If this letter has reached your hands, then the moment of truth has arrived. My daughter does not walk alone. The Mercy Trust is more than numbers. It is a shield. And to the man who mocked her kindness, know this: mercy will not cover greed." Gasps rippled across the room. Ethan's face drained of color. He gripped the edge of the table as if it could keep him from sinking. His lawyer shifted uneasily, whispering furiously into his ear. But Ethan was too stunned to listen. Then the judge lifted his gaze. This letter also includes instructions for a supplemental disclosure, sealed financial statements linked to Mrs. Lane's trust. He tapped the paper. The court is bound to read them into the record. The clerk brought forward. The air throbbed with suspense. Ethan's breathing grew loud, ragged. My hands, though trembling, folded tighter in my lap. I thought of Eleanor's words. Sometimes the door knocks on you. Yes, I said. My voice was soft, but it carried. The judge slid the file open. He lifted the first page. His eyes widened. And then he froze. The courtroom was silent, all ears waiting for his words. He looked up slowly, scanning the room. What I'm about to read will change everything you think you know about this case. The crowd leaned forward. Ethan's knees buckled, and he gripped the chair for balance. The judge cleared his throat and began, "The Mercy Trust is not only funded, it is multiplying. As of last quarter, the trust controls assets worth over—" The sound of the judge's voice was drowned suddenly by a loud bang as Ethan collapsed, hitting the floor hard. Gasps filled the air. The bailiff rushed to his side, checking his pulse. The judge lowered the paper. The courtroom waited, hanging between truth and chaos. And I sat frozen, torn between pity for the man who once held my heart and the knowledge that mercy had brought me to this very moment. What number was the judge about to say? What secret did Eleanor Caldwell tie to my name? The answer was right there, inches from his lips. Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. I love knowing where my viewers join in from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so more people can follow the twists ahead. Ethan's body hit the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the courtroom. For a moment, no one moved. The sound of his collapse had cut through the air like lightning splitting the sky, freezing everyone in place. His once cocky grin was gone, replaced with a slack expression of shock. The same man who had laughed while signing away our marriage now lay sprawled at my feet, his pride and voice swallowed by silence. Gasps swept across the room. Someone shouted, "Is he breathing?" The bailiff rushed to his side, kneeling down to check his pulse. Ethan's chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. His hand twitched, fingers curling like they were trying to grasp something that wasn't there. The judge tapped his gavel sharply, trying to restore order, but the noise of murmurs surged. Reporters whispered feverishly, their pens scratching like frantic crickets on paper. Phones tilted up, recording what no one had expected to witness. The tension was so thick, it felt like the walls themselves leaned in to listen. I remained seated, my heart hammering. I didn't rush forward. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I had learned, after years of disappointment, that I couldn't always be the one to pick him up. Ethan had chosen to laugh at me, mock me, and treat my kindness as weakness. Now he was facing the weight of the truth alone. The bailiff shouted, "He's alive!" as two paramedics pushed through the courtroom doors with a stretcher. The crowd parted in whispers and stares. They lifted Ethan carefully, securing him with straps as his lawyer scrambled behind them, his face pale and damp with sweat. Before the paramedics wheeled Ethan out, his eyes opened briefly. He turned his head toward me, his lips trembling as though trying to form words, but no sound came out. His gaze held mine for only a second before it rolled back, and the medics hurried him away. The silence that followed was eerie. Judge Walters cleared his throat. "This court will adjourn until Mr. Lane's condition is stabilized. We will reconvene once the parties are prepared to continue." He glanced at me meaningfully, his voice steady. "Mrs. Lane, the matter of the envelopes remains pending." I nodded faintly. My throat felt dry, as though all the air had been drained from the room. The bailiff escorted me out as the whispers swelled behind me. I walked down the corridor, my footsteps echoing. Cameras flashed. Reporters shoved microphones forward, voices overlapping. "Maya, did you know about the $150 million Dawo Su? Did Eleanor Caldwell really choose you as her heir? Do you still love your husband after what happened?" I kept my eyes down, my hands clasped together tightly. I said nothing. Silence was the only shield I had left. At the hospital later that evening, the air smelled of antiseptic and quiet dread. Ethan lay on a narrow bed, pale and weak, wires and monitors attached to his chest. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound cutting through the sterile silence. I stood at the doorway for a long moment, unsure if I should enter. The memories of our past tugged at me. His laughter when we first danced in the kitchen of our tiny apartment, his arms around me during storms when the lights went out, his promises whispered late at night. But those memories collided with sharper ones. His mocking voice, his dismissive tone, the nights he came home smelling of perfume that wasn't mine. A nurse touched my arm gently. "He'll wake up soon. You can sit with him if you want." I stepped inside, sitting on the hard plastic chair beside his bed. For the first time in years, I looked at him without anger. He seemed smaller, weaker, as though his arrogance had been peeled away, leaving only a man afraid of losing everything. His eyes fluttered open. He blinked, staring at the ceiling, then turned his head toward me. "Maya." His voice was raspy, fragile. "You're here." I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened, not from love, but from the weight of history pressing down. "Why?" he whispered. "After everything I did, why would you come?" I clasped my hands together. "Because mercy isn't about you. It's about me. I couldn't leave you like this, Ethan, not even now." His eyes filled with tears. I didn't know. I didn't know about the money, the trust, all of it." He swallowed hard, his throat trembling. "If I had known, maybe things would have been different." I shook my head slowly. "No, money doesn't change who people are. It only reveals them. You laughed at me because you thought I had nothing. You mocked me because you believed kindness was weakness. If I had told you the truth, you would have used it for yourself. That's who you've become." He turned his face away, ashamed. The steady beep of the monitor filled the silence between us. For the first time, Ethan had no clever laugh, no sarcastic remark, no wall of pride. He was just a man who had lost the one thing he thought he could control: the story. After a long pause, he whispered, "Do you hate me?" I closed my eyes. No. Hate would mean I still let you own a part of me. But I don't. Not anymore. Tears slipped down his cheek. Then what happens now? Before I could answer, the door creaked open. Jonathan Reed, the lawyer from the Caldwell estate, stepped inside, carrying a thick folder. His presence filled the room with quiet authority. "Mrs. Lane," he said softly, glancing at Ethan but focusing on me. "The judge has asked for us to return tomorrow. He intends to unseal the remainder of Eleanor Caldwell's instructions. You should know, and what's in here will not just shock the court, it will shake the city." Ethan's eyes widened in panic. "What do you mean? What's in it?" Jonathan placed the folder on the small table at the foot of the bed. He looked at Ethan calmly. "Let's just say, Mr. Lane, the money is only the beginning. Mrs. Lane is not merely the heir of a fortune. She is the chosen steward of an empire built on values your laughter could never buy." Ethan's face crumpled, his pride shredded by the truth. He reached out a trembling hand toward me, but I didn't move. Jonathan continued, his voice low and deliberate. "Tomorrow, when the judge reads what's in this folder, the world will see Maya not as a woman abandoned, mocked, or laughed at. They will see her as she truly is, the inheritor of a legacy that could change countless lives." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the folder, its edges glowing under the harsh fluorescent light. What secret had Eleanor entrusted to me? Why did it feel heavier than all the millions in the bank? The nurse entered, reminding us to keep the room calm for the patient. Jonathan gave a small bow of respect and slipped out, leaving the folder behind. Ethan and I sat in silence. His eyes stayed fixed on the folder like it was a ticking bomb. Mine lingered too, but not with fear, with a strange, trembling hope. At that moment I understood. Tomorrow would not just be about divorce papers or money. Tomorrow would be about destiny. The night stretched long. I sat in the hospital chair, watching Ethan drift in and out of sleep. Outside, the city lights blinked like stars scattered across the horizon. Inside, my mind spun with questions, fears, and the weight of the unknown. By dawn, I hadn't opened the folder. I wanted the truth to come the way Eleanor intended, in the open, for all to see. The next morning, the courtroom was packed beyond measure. Reporters lined the aisles, cameras set up at every angle, the hum of anticipation filling the air. People who had never cared about my life now leaned forward, waiting to feast on whatever secret the Caldwell estate had hidden. I sat quietly at my table, Miss Harris at my side. Ethan sat across from me, pale and subdued, his laughter finally silenced. His lawyer whispered to him urgently, but he barely listened. His eyes never left me. Judge Walters entered, the room rising to its feet. He took his seat, his gavel tapping once. This court will now resume the matter of Lane versus Lane. Before we proceed, we have before us the sealed instructions of the late Eleanor Caldwell. By her will and design, these instructions are to be read in open court. He picked up the folder Jonathan Reed had delivered. The room went still. My heart pounded. Every ear leaned forward. The judge opened the folder. He lifted the first page. His lips parted. His eyes widened slightly. And then, with a voice that carried like a bell across the hushed courtroom, he read, "To Maya Lane, my chosen heir. You are not only the inheritor of $150 million, you are the sole owner of a controlling stake in Caldwell International, an empire of companies, charities, and foundations across 3 continents. With this power, you hold the future of thousands of lives in your hands. But use it carefully, for mercy is the crown and kindness the throne." The courtroom exploded. Shouts, gasps, reporters yelling into cameras. The walls shook with the force of revelation. Ethan's mouth dropped open as if the floor had vanished beneath him. I sat frozen, my hands trembling. The words hung in the air like thunder that refused to fade. I wasn't just rich. I had inherited an empire, and everyone in that room now knew it. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far this story travels. And if this twist caught you by surprise, make sure you like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss the chaos that's still to come. The words still rang in my ears like church bells that refused to stop. You are the sole owner of a controlling stake in Caldwell International. The courtroom was no longer a courtroom. It was a storm. Reporters pushed forward with microphones, camera flashes blinded from every corner, and people shouted questions all at once. Some demanded to know how a simple woman like me could inherit an empire. Others gasped in disbelief, calling it a miracle, a scandal, or both. Ethan sat frozen, pale as chalk, his mouth open in disbelief. His lawyer pulled at his sleeve, whispering frantic advice, but Ethan's eyes never left me. The man who had once mocked me for bringing home only a modest paycheck now stared as though I were a stranger, a queen seated where he thought a beggar sat. Judge Walters slammed his gavel so hard it cracked the air. Bang, bang, bang! The crowd quieted, though their whispers still rippled like restless water. "This court will have order," he commanded. "This is not a circus. The instructions have been read as directed. We will proceed according to the law, with dignity." But dignity had already fled. The truth was out, and it would not be shoved back into an envelope. Jonathan Reed, calm as ever, stepped forward to the bench. "Your Honor," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a sharp blade, "the Caldwell estate has further instructions. Mrs. Lane is not simply an heir. She is the steward of a legacy that includes schools, hospitals, and businesses across the globe. She cannot be treated as an ordinary divorcee in this court. She must be treated as the guardian of a trust that touches millions." The judge nodded gravely. "The implications of this are significant." He looked at me, his eyes steady. "Mrs. Lane, do you understand what this means for your future?" My hands trembled in my lap. The weight of the truth pressed against me like a heavy crown I had not asked to wear. I don't know if I do yet," I admitted softly. Across the room, Ethan finally found his voice. "This is insane," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She was nothing but a volunteer in a soup kitchen. And now you're telling me she owns a global empire? This has to be a trick, a scam." His words cut through the room like knives, but no one laughed with him this time. His laughter had died the moment the numbers came out. The judge's gaze turned stern. "Mr. Lane, control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt." Ethan's face twisted, rage and desperation mixing like oil and fire. "No, she doesn't deserve this. She was mine. She's supposed to be mine." His voice cracked again, louder this time. "If anyone deserves that fortune, it's me. I was her husband. I built her up. Built me up?" I whispered, my voice trembling but sharp enough to cut through his madness. "You tore me down, Ethan. Every laugh, every insult, every night you came home with excuses. You didn't see me. You saw what I lacked. And now you're furious because kindness gave me everything you thought only power could give." The room fell silent. Ethan staggered back into his chair, his face pale, his arrogance crumbling like dust in the wind. Judge Walters cleared his throat, his voice steady. "We will take a recess before proceeding further. This court will reconvene in 1 hour." The gavel struck. The storm broke. The courthouse hallway was chaos. Reporters surged forward, shoving microphones into my face. "Maya, how do you feel about being the head of Caldwell International? Did you know about your inheritance all along? Will you continue with the divorce, or reconcile with your husband now that he knows?" I said nothing. Ms. Harris shielded me, her firm hand guiding me through the crowd like a lighthouse in rough seas. Jonathan Reed walked on my other side, his calm presence a wall against the chaos. Outside, the sun blazed down on the marble steps, but it felt colder than the courtroom. Cars honked, people shouted, and the world buzzed with a story that was no longer just mine. We reached the black car waiting at the curb. Jonathan opened the door for me. "Mrs. Lane, we should talk privately. The world has just shifted beneath your feet. You'll need steady ground." I slid inside, my chest heavy with the weight of it all. Ms. Harris followed, while Jonathan sat across from us. "You must understand," Jonathan began, his voice even. "This legacy isn't just about wealth, it's about responsibility. The Caldwell family built schools in Africa, hospitals in America, shelters across Europe. Eleanor saw in you not just compassion, but endurance. She chose you because you gave without asking, because you served without expecting. That is what Caldwell International needs, a heart, not just a mind." His words struck deep, a heart, not just a mind. But Ethan's face haunted me, the way he had crumbled when the truth was read, the madness in his voice when he shouted that I was his. For years I had lived under his shadow, carrying the weight of his mockery. Now the shadow was gone, but the memory of it still clung to me. "What happens to him?" I asked quietly. "Ethan?" Jonathan sighed. "The law will decide what he is entitled to in the divorce, but the Caldwell legacy is protected. He cannot touch it, not a cent, not a share. Eleanor made sure of that." Relief washed through me, but with it came sorrow. Once I had loved him. Once I had believed in us. Now we stood on opposite sides of a canyon too wide to cross. The car rolled to a stop outside my apartment building. Reporters swarmed again, shouting questions, cameras flashing. My neighbors peeked from windows, whispering, pointing. My life was no longer private. It had become a headline. I stepped out, shielding my eyes from the glare. Jonathan leaned close. "Stay strong. Tomorrow, when the court reconvenes, the world will see the full measure of Eleanor's plan. Be ready." I nodded, though my stomach churned with nerves. That night my apartment felt different. The walls seemed thinner, the silence louder. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the worn surface where Ethan and I had once shared meals, laughter, and dreams. Now it was just me and the ghosts of what had been. I pulled out the old note Eleanor had given me years ago, the one with the little drawing of a key. "Mercy is not a favor, it is a map. Use this well." A tear slid down my cheek. I whispered into the empty room, "Eleanor, I hope I don't fail you." The phone buzzed suddenly, jolting me. It was a message from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow after court. There are things you don't know. About Eleanor. About why she chose you." My heart pounded. Who could this be? Jonathan? Someone from the Caldwell family? Or worse, someone who wanted to take it all away? I stared at the screen, my hand trembling. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. My heart skipped. I went to the peephole, but the corridor was empty. Only shadows stretched across the wall. I turned back, the phone still in my hand. The message blinked on the screen like a warning. There were more secrets, more truths waiting to surface, and I had no idea if they would crown me or crush me. The courthouse was even more crowded than before. Word had spread overnight, and now the steps leading up to the tall marble building looked like a festival of flashing cameras and loud voices. Reporters pushed forward, each one desperate to catch a glimpse of the woman who inherited $150 million and an empire. I gripped the strap of my purse tightly, Ms. Harris at one side, Jonathan Reed at the other. Their presence was the only thing that kept me from turning and running back home. My stomach churned with nerves, and my heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick, buzzing with whispers. Everyone was waiting for the gavel to fall again, waiting to hear more secrets spill out. Ethan sat across from me, looking tired and hollow. His face was pale, his once confident posture slumped. He avoided my eyes, but every few moments he stole a glance, as though searching for a crack in my resolve. Judge Walters entered. The room rose to its feet, then settled. The gavel struck once. Bang. "This court is back in session," he said. His tone was stern, commanding silence. "We are here to continue the reading of Eleanor Caldwell's sealed instructions and to address matters related to the divorce proceedings of Lane versus Lane." Jonathan stepped forward with a folder in hand, thicker than the last. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I will submit the remainder of the Caldwell documents." The judge nodded. "Proceed." As the papers were handed to him, I caught sight of Ethan shifting uneasily in his chair. He tugged at his tie, his lips twitching nervously. It was strange to see him like this, so small, so powerless. The judge opened the folder and scanned the first page. His eyes flickered in surprise, then steadied. "These documents confirm that Mrs. Lane is not only the heir of the Mercy Trust, but also the controlling shareholder of Caldwell International. Effective immediately, Mrs. Lane possesses full decision-making authority over its assets and institutions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Pens scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and whispers filled the air like restless bees. But then the judge raised his hand for silence. "There is more. This letter is addressed directly to Mrs. Lane." He adjusted his glasses and began to read aloud. "Maya, you were chosen not because of wealth, but because of your mercy. The world chases money, but mercy is rarer and stronger. With this inheritance comes responsibility, not just for yourself, but for thousands who depend on these institutions. The man beside you may laugh at kindness, but one day he will learn that mercy is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form." My chest tightened. Eleanor's words felt as though she was still alive, speaking directly into my heart. The judge lowered the letter slowly. The courtroom held its breath. Then Ethan leapt to his feet. His voice cracked as he shouted, "This is unfair. She doesn't deserve any of this. She was nothing. I was the one who worked hard. I was the one who kept us afloat when she wasted her time with soup kitchens and useless classes." "Mr. Lane, sit down," the judge thundered. But Ethan didn't. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. "She's playing all of you. She's not some saint. She's just a woman who couldn't even make enough money to pay rent without me." Whispers swept through the room, some people shaking their heads, others watching silently, almost pitying him. I stood slowly, my voice calm but firm. "Ethan, all those years you thought I had nothing. You were wrong. I had something you never valued, kindness. And that kindness led me here. You laughed when you signed those papers because you thought you were winning. But sometimes mercy waits until the very end to reveal its strength." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ethan's face twisted, his hands shaking. He slammed his fist against the table. "You think you're better than me. You think money makes you strong. You'll see, Maya, you'll all see." "Mr. Lane," Judge Walters' gavel banged. "Another outburst and I will hold you in contempt of court." Ethan collapsed back into his chair, breathing heavily. His lawyer covered his face with his hand, muttering something under his breath. The judge sighed, turning back to the papers. There is one final note in this file. It is marked for Maya's eyes only. The court will respect this instruction. Mrs. Lane, this envelope will be delivered to you directly. Jonathan retrieved the envelope and handed it to me. My hands trembled as I held it. The small drawing of a key was sketched on the front, the same as Eleanor's first note. My heart pounded, wondering what words it carried, what secret Eleanor had left, just for me. Before I could slip it into my purse, a loud voice called out from the back of the courtroom. "Objection, Your Honor!" Gasps erupted. A man in a grey suit stood tall, his face stern, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. "My name is Richard Caldwell," he announced. "I am Eleanor Caldwell's nephew, and I will not allow this woman to steal what rightfully belongs to our family." The room exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in, and all eyes turned to me. Richard Caldwell's gaze burned with fury as he pointed directly at me. "She doesn't deserve any of it. That inheritance is a mistake, and I will fight it with everything I have." My heart raced. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than ever. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. The air inside the courtroom grew so tense it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Richard Caldwell's words, "She doesn't deserve any of it," still echoed as he strode confidently to the front. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment all his life. Tall, with neatly combed silver hair and sharp blue eyes, he carried himself with the pride of someone who believed the world owed him everything. Jonathan Reed adjusted his glasses, his expression unreadable, but I saw his jaw tighten. Ms. Harris leaned close to me, whispering urgently, "Stay calm, Maya. This is expected. Wealth always brings challenges." Expected, I thought, my fingers tightening around the sealed envelope in my lap. Nothing about this moment felt expected. Nothing about Richard's piercing glare felt predictable. The judge's gavel cracked the air. Bang! "Order in the court. State your purpose clearly, Mr. Caldwell." Richard stepped forward, his voice sharp and rehearsed. "Your Honor, my aunt, Eleanor Caldwell, may have left instructions, but I am her blood, her only nephew, her rightful heir. This woman," he pointed at me with a finger trembling from rage, "is an outsider, a nobody. She tricked Eleanor into giving her this fortune, and I will not stand by while she steals the Caldwell legacy." Gasps filled the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Some people craned their necks just to get a better view of his face. Jonathan rose smoothly, calm as ever. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell's claims are baseless. The will and trust were executed legally, signed, sealed, and witnessed. His blood ties have no bearing here. Eleanor Caldwell had full rights to choose her heir, and she chose Mrs. Maya Lane." Richard's eyes flashed with fury. "Because she was manipulated," he shouted. "She found some poor volunteer to flatter her, to act kind, and my aunt fell for it in her old age. My family has built Caldwell International for decades, and you're telling me a schoolteacher with nothing but soup kitchens on her resume deserves to run it? Absurd." His words cut, sharp as knives, but I sat still. My hands trembled under the table, but I kept my face steady. Judge Walters slammed his gavel again. "Mr. Caldwell, you will respect this courtroom. If you have evidence to present, do so. Otherwise, sit down." Richard smirked as though expecting this. He held up a thick folder. "I have documents, Your Honor. Records showing Mrs. Lane's financial struggles, her dependence on others, her lack of experience. Proof that she is unfit to manage an empire like Caldwell International." Ms. Harris stood. "Your Honor, those are not relevant to the matter of inheritance. Eleanor Caldwell's wishes were clear and legally binding. This is nothing but an attempt to slander my client." The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Very well. Mr. Caldwell, submit your so-called evidence to the court. But unless you can provide proof of fraud or coercion, your objections will carry no weight." Richard handed the folder to the bailiff, his smirk never leaving his face. "You'll see, Your Honor, she's not who she claims to be." The papers were passed to the judge. He scanned the first few pages, his brow furrowing. "These are bank statements, old pay stubs, credit reports. What exactly are you trying to prove?" "That she was broke," Richard snapped. "That she had nothing. And now, suddenly, she has everything. Tell me that isn't suspicious." The judge set the papers down with a heavy sigh. "Poverty is not a crime, Mr. Caldwell, nor is humility." The courtroom chuckled softly at his words, and Richard's face turned crimson. He turned toward me, his voice dripping with venom. "She doesn't belong in this family. She doesn't belong in this legacy, and I'll spend every dollar I have to make sure she never touches it." I met his gaze steadily, though my heart pounded like a drum. "This isn't about belonging to a family, Richard. It's about carrying a torch. Eleanor didn't choose me for my blood. She chose me for my heart. Maybe that's something you'll never understand." The words slipped from my mouth before I could stop them. A ripple spread through the courtroom, whispers rising again. Richard's eyes narrowed. "We'll see how long your heart keeps you standing once the lawsuits begin." The judge raised his gavel, his patience thinning. "Enough. This court will not entertain threats. Mr. Caldwell, if you wish to contest the will, you may file separately. But for now, we return to the matter at hand." The gavel struck, ending the chaos, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. That night, the city buzzed with headlines. My face was splashed across every news station, every website, every social media feed. From rags to 150 million, the Maya Lane story. Another headline read, "Family feud over Caldwell Empire. Nephew challenges unexpected heir." I sat in my apartment, the sealed envelope Eleanor had left me resting on the table. My phone buzzed non-stop. Calls from reporters, distant relatives, even old classmates who hadn't spoken to me in years. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But the message from the night before still haunted me. "Meet me tomorrow after court. There are things you don't know. About Eleanor. About why she chose you. Who was it from? What more could there possibly be? I had already inherited more than I could comprehend. Why did it feel like Eleanor's plan still had layers hidden beneath the surface?" The clock ticked past midnight. I reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed the flap, but I hesitated. Something in my gut told me to wait. Eleanor had timed everything so carefully. If she had wanted me to open it now, she would have said so. I pushed it aside, burying it under a pile of papers. My chest tightened as I whispered into the empty room, "Eleanor, what are you trying to tell me?" Sleep never came easy that night. The next morning, the courthouse was even more chaotic than before. Protesters stood outside with signs, some supporting me, others demanding the Caldwell fortune return to the rightful family. Reporters shouted questions as I stepped out of the car, their voices blending into a storm. Inside, the judge addressed the court. "We reconvene today not only to continue proceedings, but also to address Mr. Caldwell's official petition to contest the inheritance." Richard stood proudly, his smirk wider than ever. "Thank you, Your Honor. I assure you this is just the beginning." Jonathan Reed leaned toward me. "Stay steady. He's bluffing. Eleanor tied up every loose end." But my heart still pounded. Because even if Richard failed in court, he had already succeeded at something else. He had planted doubt. Doubt in the minds of the public, doubt in Ethan's eyes, and maybe, just maybe, doubt in my own heart. As the judge prepared to read more from Eleanor's files, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. The doors swung open and a woman entered. She was tall, elegant, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that burned with purpose. The whispers began instantly. "Who is she? Is that—" The woman walked forward with graceful confidence. "Your Honor," she said clearly, "my name is Catherine Blake. I was Eleanor Caldwell's personal assistant for 20 years, and I have documents that prove Richard Caldwell is lying." The courtroom gasped. Richard's face went pale. The judge gestured for her to approach. Catherine handed over a folder, her hands steady. Richard jumped up, shouting, "She's lying! She's just a servant! She'll say anything to protect the thief sitting over there!" He jabbed his finger at me, but Catherine's voice cut through like steel. "No, Richard, I'm not protecting Maya. I'm protecting Eleanor's truth. And if you keep shouting, the court will soon learn about the lies you've been hiding." The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Bailiff, bring this to me." The folder was passed to his bench. He opened it, scanning the first page. His eyes widened. "This," he murmured, "this changes everything." The room leaned forward, everyone desperate to hear the next words. Richard lunged toward the bench, his voice breaking with panic. "Don't read it! Don't you dare read it!" The bailiff grabbed him, holding him back as he thrashed. Judge Walters lifted the paper high, his voice booming. "On the record, I will now read the testimony of Catherine Blake, witnessed and notarized, concerning the Caldwell inheritance." The room went dead silent. My breath caught in my throat. And then he began. "I, Catherine Blake, testify that Richard Caldwell attempted to forge documents to claim Eleanor Caldwell's estate before her passing. I testify that Eleanor discovered this betrayal and struck his name permanently from her will. Furthermore, Eleanor instructed me to ensure that Maya Lane would know the full truth when the time was right." Gasps exploded across the room. Reporters shouted. Cameras flashed wildly. Richard's face twisted in fury as he screamed, "She's lying! She's lying!" But the bailiff held him firm. I sat frozen, my heart racing. Eleanor hadn't just chosen me, she had rejected him. And now the world knew why. The courtroom was electric. Catherine Blake's testimony had struck like thunder, and the silence that followed was heavier than stone. Reporters sat frozen for half a second, then the explosion came. Shouts, questions, the wild snapping of cameras. Judge Walters banged his gavel so hard the sound cracked against the walls. Bang, bang, bang. "Order in the court," he thundered. "If this disruption continues, I will clear the gallery." Richard Caldwell was livid, thrashing in the bailiff's grip like a man drowning. His face burned red, sweat dripping down his forehead. "She's lying! That woman is lying! My aunt was senile. She didn't know what she was doing." Catherine did not flinch. Her posture was straight, her eyes calm, her voice clear. Eleanor Caldwell knew exactly what she was doing. She was sharper in her old age than most people are at 20. She saw through you, Richard. She saw your greed. That's why she disinherited you. Her words rang across the room like a bell of truth. I could see the people in the gallery nodding, whispering. Richard's face twisted even more, as though the approval of strangers burned him alive. Jonathan Reed stood, his tone controlled but sharp. "Your Honor, this testimony, along with the documents Ms. Blake has provided, prove beyond any doubt that Eleanor Caldwell's will was deliberate and untainted. Richard Caldwell has no legal claim. He is attempting to overturn his aunt's wishes out of bitterness and greed." The judge scanned the documents slowly, carefully. His brows rose at certain lines, his lips pressing together in others. Finally, he set the papers down and looked over his glasses at Richard. "These are notarized records," Judge Walters said firmly, "signed, sealed, and dated before Eleanor Caldwell's passing. They are admissible. Mr. Caldwell, your accusations carry no weight against this testimony. If you wish to contest further, you will do so in civil court, not here. As of now, the inheritance stands with Mrs. Lane." The gavel came down. Bang! Applause erupted from the gallery. Reporters clapped, some even cheered, though the judge quickly silenced them with another sharp crack of the gavel. Still, the energy could not be contained. The tide had turned. Richard Caldwell sagged in the bailiff's grip, defeated but still dangerous. His eyes locked onto me, burning with hatred. "This isn't over, Maya," he spat. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've stepped into. The Caldwell empire isn't just money, it's power, and power has enemies." His words chilled me to the bone. But before I could reply, the bailiff escorted him out, his furious shouts echoing down the hall until they faded into nothing. When court adjourned that day, the courthouse steps were a sea of people. Protesters, supporters, reporters. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Microphones stretched toward me, voices overlapping in a storm. "Mrs. Lane, how do you feel about winning the inheritance battle? Do you have any comment on Richard Caldwell's accusations? Will you step into leadership of Caldwell International immediately?" I wanted to run, but Ms. Harris leaned in and whispered, "You can't hide, Maya, not anymore. If you don't speak, others will speak for you." She was right. My hands trembled, but I turned to face the crowd. Cameras flashed so brightly it felt like standing under lightning. "I never asked for this," I began, my voice shaky but gaining strength with each word. "I never asked for fortune or power. What I asked, for years, was only to make a difference in the lives of others. Eleanor saw something in me I didn't even see in myself. And though I may not be her blood, I will honor her legacy with every breath I have, because wealth without kindness is nothing, but kindness with wealth can change the world." The crowd erupted in cheers. Some clapped, others shouted my name. Reporters jotted every word. But beneath the noise I saw him, Ethan, standing at the edge of the crowd, his face unreadable, not shouting, not smirking, just watching me. For a moment our eyes met. 100 memories rushed back, good and bad, and my chest tightened. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but then he turned and melted into the crowd before I could move. That night, exhaustion weighed on me like an anchor. I sat at my kitchen table, the sealed envelope Eleanor had left still untouched before me. My phone buzzed non-stop with calls and messages, but I ignored them all. My world had shifted so much in a matter of days, I could barely catch my breath. At last I reached for the envelope. My fingers hesitated at the flap. I could almost hear Eleanor's voice. "Sometimes the door knocks on you." Slowly I tore it open. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "Maya, if you are reading this, it means you have endured the storms and chosen to stand. The wealth and the empire are yours, yes, but they are only tools. The true gift is yet to be revealed. Look beneath what you think you know. Look at the people around you. Not all who smile are friends, and not all who frown are enemies. Trust mercy, but guard it wisely. One day soon, you will face a choice that will determine not just your life, but the future of countless others. When that moment comes, remember this: power without kindness is corruption, but kindness without courage is weakness. You must be both." My hands trembled as I read the words again and again. The true gift is yet to be revealed. What did she mean? Hadn't she already given me more than I could fathom? Before I could process it, a knock sounded at my door. I froze. The letter's warning rang in my ears. "Not all who smile are friends." I approached slowly, peering through the peephole. A figure stood in the hallway, shadowed by the dim light. When the person turned slightly, my heart stopped. It was Ethan, and he was holding something in his hand. The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the small apartment like a drumbeat of fate. My hands clutched Eleanor's letter tighter, the words, "Not all who smile are friends," still burning in my mind. Through the peephole, Ethan's face looked worn, almost broken. His eyes darted nervously down the hallway, then back to the door. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled envelope, thin, old, as if it had been handled too many times. For a moment I thought of leaving him out there, closing my eyes, walking away, but curiosity tugged harder than fear. What was in that envelope? Why come here, after everything? I opened the door slowly, leaving the chain on. "What do you want, Ethan?" He held the envelope up, his voice shaky. "Please, just hear me out. 5 minutes, Maya. That's all I'm asking." His tone wasn't mocking, not sharp or cruel. It was the voice of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left but desperation. Against my better judgment, I unlatched the chain and stepped aside. He walked in, his shoulders hunched, eyes flicking nervously around the room, as though he expected hidden cameras. I noticed the way his shoes scuffed against the floor, no longer polished, no longer proud. He set the envelope on the table between us and pushed it toward me with trembling hands. "I found this years ago, back when we were still married. I didn't understand it then. I didn't tell you because I thought it was nothing. But now," his voice cracked, "now I think it might be connected to Eleanor, to all of this." I stared at the envelope. It was addressed in neat, flowing handwriting, "To Maya Lane, for when the time is right." My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "It was slipped under our door one night. I opened it thinking it was for both of us, but inside was just a key, an old iron key. No note, no explanation." I thought maybe it was junk or some mistake, so I kept it hidden in my drawer. Until now. He pulled the key out of his pocket and placed it on the table. It was heavy, darkened with age, its teeth oddly shaped. I picked it up slowly, feeling its cold weight in my palm. The small drawing of a key on Eleanor's letters flashed in my mind. This was no coincidence. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. Ethan's eyes filled with shame. Because I was selfish. I didn't want to encourage your connection with Eleanor. I thought, if you didn't chase after her, you'd stay with me. You'd depend on me. His words cut deeper than any knife. I placed the key back on the table. You kept something meant for me, something that might have explained everything. Do you realize what you've done? Tears welled in his eyes. I realize it now, and I'm sorry. Truly, Maya, I was blind. I thought money was the only kind of power. I laughed at your kindness because I couldn't understand it. But look at me now. What has greed given me? Nothing. Nothing but emptiness. His voice cracked, and for the first time in years I saw the man I once fell in love with, the man before pride consumed him. But I also saw the warning in Eleanor's words. Not all who smile are friends, and not all who frown are enemies. Could I trust this man again, even as he wept before me? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. If you have the key, meet me tomorrow night at the Caldwell estate. Alone. The truth cannot wait any longer. My stomach twisted. Whoever sent that knew. They knew about the key. I looked up at Ethan. His eyes searched mine desperately. "What is it?" he asked. I slid the phone out of sight. Nothing. But inside my heart pounded. Tomorrow night I would step into the Caldwell estate with this key, and something told me the truth waiting there would change everything again. The next day in court, the air was still buzzing from Catherine Blake's testimony. Richard Caldwell's absence spoke volumes. He hadn't dared show his face again after being exposed, but his shadow lingered. The whispers, the rumors, the doubts, they all clung to me like cobwebs. Judge Walters addressed the court. With the challenges resolved, the matter of inheritance is closed. The trust and Caldwell International belong legally and entirely to Mrs. Lane. Divorce proceedings will continue with settlement negotiations, but as of this day, Mrs. Lane stands as the rightful heir. The gavel fell. Bang! It was over. Or at least, it should have been. Because as I walked out of that courtroom, reporters shouting, cameras flashing, people calling my name. My hand tightened around the iron key in my pocket. The true gift is yet to be revealed. Eleanor's words haunted me. And tomorrow night, I would find out what she meant. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the key before me. Ethan was gone. I hadn't invited him back. But his words lingered. Was his sorrow real, or just another mask? I picked up the key, studying its teeth, its weight. I held it against Eleanor's last letter, the one marked with the little drawing of a key. The shapes matched. My breath caught. This was no ordinary key. It was the piece of a puzzle Eleanor had left me. And tomorrow night, that puzzle would lead me into the Caldwell estate, into secrets deeper than fortune, deeper than inheritance. The thought both thrilled and terrified me, because if the money had already changed my life, what would the truth do? And who would I become when I finally unlocked it? The night was heavy with silence, the kind that pressed against your chest and made every sound feel louder than it should. I stood at the gates of the Caldwell estate, the iron key clutched tightly in my palm. The sprawling mansion loomed before me, its tall windows glowing faintly in the moonlight like watchful eyes. The estate had always been a mystery to me. I'd only ever seen it in passing, driving by on my way to the food pantry years ago, wondering what kind of life existed behind its high walls and marble columns. Now here I was, invited, or lured, into its depths. Maya, if you are reading this in the library of my home, then you hold the key not only to my fortune but to my past. Caldwell International was built on more than charity and businesses. It was built on secrets, secrets I could not carry to my grave. Richard believes the empire is his birthright, but he does not know the truth. The truth is that he was never meant to inherit because his hands are stained with betrayal, even from childhood. But there is another truth, Maya. One about you. You are not here by accident. Years ago, before you even knew my name, your mother worked within these walls. She was my confidant, my sister in everything but blood. When she passed, I promised her I would watch over you. That promise led me here to this moment. That is why I chose you, not just for your kindness, but because you are part of this family's true legacy. I froze. The words blurred before my eyes. My mother? Here? I whispered it aloud. My mother worked for Eleanor? Richard's face drained of color. No, that's not possible. But I knew deep in my bones it was true. The kindness Eleanor had seen in me wasn't just chance, it was a legacy passed down through my mother, hidden from me until now. Tears stung my eyes, my knees weakened, but I held myself upright, clutching the letter. Eleanor hadn't just chosen me because of my mercy. She had chosen me because my mother had been her closest ally, her silent partner in building the empire. This wasn't just inheritance. This was destiny. Richard staggered back, shaking his head in denial. Lies, all lies, his voice cracked. You'll destroy everything with this nonsense. No, Richard, I said softly, the weight of the truth settling inside me like a crown. You already destroyed everything with your greed. Eleanor built this on mercy. My mother believed in that. And now, so will I. His face twisted into something dark, dangerous. For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me again, but instead he sneered. You think this is over? You have no idea what enemies this empire has. You'll drown, Maya, and when you do, don't expect mercy to save you. He stormed out, his footsteps echoing until the library fell silent again. I stood there, the letter in my hand, the key still cold in my palm. My tears dried on my cheeks as the truth burned into my heart. I wasn't just the woman Ethan mocked. I wasn't just the outsider Richard despised. I was the heir to a legacy my mother had helped build. And now, it was mine to protect. But even as I whispered a prayer of gratitude, Eleanor's warning echoed in my mind. Power without kindness is corruption, but kindness without courage is weakness. You must be both. The path ahead would not be easy. Richard was right about one thing, enemies would come. But for the first time in my life, I felt ready. I folded the letter carefully, pressed it to my heart, and whispered, I won't fail you, Mama. I won't fail you, Eleanor. The library lights flickered once as though the house itself had heard, and in that moment I knew. The final test was still waiting. The night air clung to me as I left the Caldwell estate. The letter from Eleanor pressed against my chest, folded carefully inside my jacket. My mother. She had walked these halls, worked beside Eleanor, carried secrets that now sat heavy on my shoulders. The iron key still rested in my palm. I turned it over and over as I walked down the long gravel path, every crunch beneath my shoes echoing like the weight of destiny. For so long, I had believed I was just a woman scraping by, serving food in kitchens, cutting fruit for children, trying to hold together a marriage built on sand. But now, the truth was undeniable. I wasn't chosen by chance. I was chosen by promise. Still, Eleanor's words haunted me. Power without kindness is corruption, but kindness without courage is weakness. You must be both. The test wasn't over. The next morning, the courthouse buzzed like a beehive. Today was supposed to be the conclusion of my divorce. Settlement terms, property division, final signatures. But when I stepped through the heavy doors, I knew this day was going to be more than ink on paper. Ethan was already seated at his table. His face looked older than it had a week ago, lines deeper, his once confident posture slumped. He didn't laugh this time, he didn't even smirk. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place, part regret, part longing, part fear. Across the aisle, Richard was there too, despite the bailiff's warnings from the last hearing. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear, but Richard's eyes burned holes into me. He was cornered, But cornered animals were always the most dangerous. The judge entered. The gavel struck. Bang. "We are here today," Judge Walters said firmly, "to finalize the divorce settlement of Maya Lane and Ethan Lane, and to acknowledge the standing of the Caldwell inheritance. This court recognizes Mrs. Lane as the sole legal heir." Whispers filled the room. The judge looked down at the papers before him. "The financial settlement has been reviewed. Given the disclosures, Mr. Lane is entitled to a fair division of assets accumulated during the marriage, but the Caldwell Trust remains separate and untouchable." Ethan stood slowly, his voice low, strained. "Your Honor, I don't want anything." The entire room gasped. Even Richard turned his head in disbelief. Ethan's eyes met mine. "Maya, for years I mocked you. I laughed at your kindness, thinking it was weakness. I pushed you down because I didn't know how to rise myself. But now I see what I lost. Not the money. You." His words shook me more than I expected. My throat tightened, old wounds pricking open. "I don't deserve a cent of this settlement," he continued, his voice breaking. "What I deserve is your forgiveness, even if you can never give it." He sank back into his chair, silent. The courtroom buzzed louder than ever. Richard shot up instantly, slamming his fists on the table. "Forgiveness? What about me? I'm family. I built my life on Caldwell International's promise. And you hand it to her because of a promise to a dead maid?" My blood boiled. I stood, my voice stronger than it had ever been. She wasn't a maid. She was my mother. And she was Eleanor's confidant, her sister in all but blood. Eleanor built this legacy with her help. That's why she trusted me to carry it forward, not you, Richard. You were blinded by greed. My mother was driven by love. The gallery erupted in gasps and murmurs. Some reporters even stood, shouting questions. The judge slammed his gavel repeatedly. Bang, bang, bang. "Enough!" Judge Walters' voice thundered. "This is a court of law, not a circus." He turned to Richard, his eyes sharp. "You are hereby barred from further interference in this case. If you wish to contest, you will do so in civil court, but I warn you, your chances are slim." Richard's face twisted. He pointed at me, his voice venomous. "This isn't over, Maya. You think you've won? You have no idea what enemies come with that crown. They will come for you. And when they do, your mercy won't save you." Bailiffs dragged him out, his shouts echoing until the doors slammed shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Walters cleared his throat. "This court rules in favor of Mrs. Lane. The divorce is finalized. The inheritance stands." He raised his gavel one final time. Bang, it was done. When I stepped out of the courthouse, the world roared. Cameras flashed, voices shouted, microphones crowded. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the noise. I raised my head high. "I didn't win because of money," I said loudly so the world could hear. "I won because kindness is not weakness. Mercy is not foolishness. It is strength. Eleanor knew that. My mother knew that. And now I will honor their legacy by building something greater than wealth. A future where no one has to be mocked for giving or laughed at for being kind." The crowd erupted in cheers. Reporters shouted my name, but their voices faded beneath the swell of hope rising in my chest. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd again, watching me. This time, he didn't approach. He just bowed his head slightly, as though in silent apology, before disappearing into the sea of people. I clutched Eleanor's letter close, her words alive in my heart. "Power without kindness is corruption. Kindness without courage is weakness. You must be both." And in that moment, I knew who I was. I was no longer the woman Ethan mocked, no longer the outsider Richard despised. I was the daughter of mercy, the heir of kindness, the steward of a legacy built on courage. And though enemies would surely come, I would face them head-on, with kindness, with courage, with both. The story that began with Ethan's laughter had ended with Eleanor's truth. And a new chapter, the real chapter of my life, had just begun. Where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. I love hearing from you all across the world. And if you've enjoyed this full story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share so more people can experience the power of kindness and courage through stories like this.